My grandfather's dying wish seemed like the rambling of a man lost in memories. Take my old guitar to the corner of 6th and Main, he whispered, his weathered hand gripping mine. Play the songs I taught you. Promise me. I thought it was sentimental nonsense from a man saying goodbye. I had no idea he was orchestrating the most important audition of my life. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, what's the best piece of advice a grandparent ever gave you? Drop it in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Now, let's go back to that hospital room where everything began. I was about to give up on the only dream I'd ever had. I'd been trying to make it as a musician in Nashville for 4 years, and all I had to show for it were rejection letters, empty tip jars, and a credit card debt that kept me awake at night. I was working 3 jobs just to survive: waitressing at a diner during the day, cleaning offices at night, and playing guitar at a coffee shop on weekends for tips that barely covered my gas money. My tiny studio apartment was so small, I had to move my guitar case to open the refrigerator, and I was 2 months behind on rent. The walls of my apartment were covered in rejection letters from record labels, each one a small paper knife to my dreams. Thank you for your submission, but we're looking for a different sound. While your music shows promise, it's not quite what we're looking for at this time. We encourage you to keep developing your craft and try again in the future. I'd memorized every polite dismissal, every gentle letdown, every professional way of saying, "You're not good enough." The final blow came on a Tuesday morning when I got the call from Meridian Records. I'd been waiting 3 weeks to hear back about a demo I'd submitted, and I'd allowed myself to hope that maybe, finally, this would be my break. "Jenny, this is Sandra from Meridian." The voice on the phone was professionally kind but distant. "We've reviewed your submission, and while we think you have a nice voice, we're looking for something more commercial. We'd suggest you consider songwriting for other artists instead of pursuing a recording career yourself." It was the same feedback I'd gotten from a dozen other labels, just worded more politely. Too folk for country, too country for pop, too authentic for mainstream. I was musical purgatory, talented enough to get meetings, but not marketable enough to get signed. That afternoon, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the diner where I worked, staring at my phone and fighting back tears. My manager had already warned me that my shifts were being cut because business was slow. My landlord had left another voicemail about the overdue rent, and my credit card was maxed out. I called my mom, and the words tumbled out before I could stop them. "I think it's time to come home. I can't keep doing this. I'm drowning here." "Oh, honey," she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. She'd never understood why I'd left my teaching job in Ohio to chase what she called pipe dreams in Nashville. "Your old principal called last week. They have an opening for a music teacher. You could have your old life back." My old life. Safe, predictable, practical. A steady paycheck, health insurance, a retirement plan, everything a responsible adult was supposed to want, everything that felt like giving up. "The position starts in 2 weeks, Mom continued. "I could call Mrs. Wright tomorrow and tell her you're interested. You could be home by the weekend, honey. You could stop struggling." Stop struggling. The words hung in the air like a lifeline and a noose at the same time. That's when she told me about Grandpa Eric. "He's been asking for you," she said gently. "The doctors say it's time. If you want to say goodbye, you should come soon." I drove the 8 hours to Ohio that night, my guitar and my few belongings packed into my beat-up Honda Civic. I told myself I was just going to say goodbye to my grandfather, but deep down, I knew I was probably saying goodbye to my dreams too. Grandpa Eric had been my first music teacher, the one who'd put a guitar in my hands when I was 7 years old and taught me that music wasn't just sound. It was emotion made audible. He'd been a musician himself in his youth, though he never talked much about those days. All I knew was that he'd played in clubs and honky-tonks in the 1970s before settling down to raise a family and run a small music store. He was the only person who'd never questioned my decision to pursue music. When everyone else was telling me to be realistic, to have a backup plan, Grandpa Eric would just smile and say, "The world needs your songs, Jenny girl. Don't let them convince you otherwise." I found him in the hospice center, looking smaller and frailer than I'd ever seen him. But his eyes still held that familiar spark, and when he saw me, his face lit up with the same joy I remembered from childhood. "There's my little songbird," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was hoping you'd come." We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He asked about Nashville, about my music, about the songs I'd been writing. I'd tried to keep things positive, but he could see through me like he always had. "You're thinking about quitting," he said. It wasn't a question. I couldn't lie to him. "I don't know, Grandpa. Maybe it's time to be practical. Maybe Mom's right about the teaching job. I'm 26 years old and I'm living like a college student. I can't even afford to fix my car when it breaks down." "And you think teaching will make you happy?" "I think teaching will make me stable. I think it'll make my family stop worrying about me. I think it'll let me sleep at night without wondering how I'm going to pay rent." Grandpa Eric was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the parking lot. When he spoke again, his voice was stronger than it had been all day. "Jenny, let me tell you something about regret. It's a heavy thing to carry, heavier than any debt, heavier than any struggle. I've been carrying it for 50 years, and it never gets lighter." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I had a chance once, a real chance, and I let fear talk me out of it. I let other people convince me to be practical, to be safe, to choose security over dreams, and I have regretted it every single day since." He turned back to me with an intensity that surprised me. "Jenny, I need you to do something for me. Something important." "Anything, Grandpa." "In my closet at home, there's an old guitar case, black leather, beat up with my initials on it. I want you to take that guitar and I want you to go to Nashville, to the corner of 6th Avenue and Main Street. I want you to play there." I frowned, confused. "Play on a street corner? Grandpa, I've been busking for years. It doesn't—" "Not just any corner," he interrupted, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "That corner, 6th and Main, and I want you to play the songs I taught you. The old ones, Wildwood Flower, Will the Circle Be Unbroken, In the Sweet By and By. Promise me." It seemed like such a strange request. Grandpa Eric had always been practical, focused. This felt like the rambling of a man whose mind was starting to wander. "Grandpa, I don't understand. Why that specific corner?" "Just promise me," he said, his eyes pleading. "Promise me you'll do this before you make any decisions about your future. One afternoon, that's all I'm asking. Play the songs I taught you on that corner, and then decide what you want to do with your life." I squeezed his hand. "I promise." He smiled then, a peaceful expression settling over his features. "Good girl. And Jenny, take the guitar case too. Don't just take the guitar, take the whole case. It's important." "Why is it important?" "Because some stories can only be told when all the pieces are together," he said cryptically, "and because that guitar has been waiting 50 years to finish a conversation." He passed away 2 days later, peacefully in his sleep. At the funeral, person after person told stories about how Grandpa Eric had helped them, encouraged them, believed in them when no one else would. He'd been a quiet force of good in our small town, and I realized I'd never fully understood the impact he'd had on people's lives. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the local bakery, told me how Grandpa Eric had given her son free guitar lessons when money was tight. Mr. Rodriguez, the mechanic, shared how Eric had played at his daughter's wedding for free when their hired musician canceled at the last minute. Story after story of quiet kindness, of a man who used music to make other people's lives a little brighter. After the service, I went to his house to collect the guitar he'd mentioned. I found the case exactly where he'd said it would be, tucked away in the back of his bedroom closet. It was indeed black leather, worn and scuffed with age, with E.M. embossed in faded gold letters near the handle. Inside was a beautiful acoustic guitar, a Martin D28, that had to be worth several $1,000s. I'd never seen it before, which was strange, because I thought I knew all of Grandpa Eric's instruments. The wood was aged to a rich honey color, and when I strummed it, the tone was absolutely gorgeous, warm, resonant, and with the kind of depth that only comes from decades of being played. There was something else in the case, too. Tucked into the accessory compartment was an old photograph, black and white, showing two young men with guitars standing on what looked like a street corner. One of them was clearly my grandfather, probably in his early 20s, with the same kind eyes and gentle smile I remembered. The other man was about the same age, with dark hair and an intense expression. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "Eric and Frank, 6th and Main, 1973. The beginning of everything." I stared at the photo for a long time, trying to piece together what it meant. Grandpa Eric had never mentioned a musical partner named Frank. In fact, he'd rarely talked about his musical past at all. But here was evidence of something I'd never known about, a partnership, a history, a story he'd never shared. I kept my promise, though it felt pointless. 3 days after the funeral, I drove back to Nashville with Grandpa Eric's guitar and a heart full of confusion. I was planning to honor his dying wish, play on that street corner for an afternoon, and then drive back to Ohio to accept the teaching position. The corner of 6th Avenue and Main Street was in the heart of downtown Nashville, just a few blocks from the famous honk tonks on Broadway. It was a busy intersection, with plenty of foot traffic from tourists and locals alike. I'd busked in the area before, though never at that specific corner. I set up around 2 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon, opening the guitar case and placing it on the sidewalk in front of me. The Martin's tone was even more beautiful in the open air, and I started with Wildwood Flower, just like Grandpa Eric had requested. The song felt different on his guitar. Richer, more resonant, like the instrument itself was adding layers of history and emotion to the melody. I closed my eyes and let myself get lost in the music, playing the way Grandpa Eric had taught me, not just the notes, but the feelings behind them. I played for about an hour, working through all the old songs he taught me. A few people stopped to listen, dropping coins and bills into the guitar case, but mostly it was just me and the music, and the memory of my grandfather's hands guiding mine on the fretboard when I was 7 years old. I was just finishing In the Sweet By and By when I noticed him. He was an older man, probably in his 70s, well-dressed in a way that suggested money but not flashiness. Expensive jeans, a perfectly fitted blazer, shoes that probably cost more than my rent. He was standing about 20 feet away, just watching me play. And there was something in his expression that made me pause. He was crying. Not sobbing, but tears were streaming down his face as he listened to me play. When I finished the song, he walked closer, his steps hesitant, like he was approaching something sacred. "Excuse me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "That guitar. Where did you get that guitar?" I looked down at the Martin, then back at him. "It was my grandfather's. He passed away last week." The man's face went pale. "Your grandfather. What was his name?" "Eric Martinez." The man staggered slightly, reaching out to steady himself against a nearby lamppost. "Eric Martinez," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. My God, I can't believe it." "I'm sorry, did Did you know my grandfather?" The man looked at me with eyes that held 50 years of pain and regret. "Know him? Honey, Eric Martinez was my best friend, my musical partner, my brother. We were going to conquer the world together." He gestured to the corner where we were standing. "This corner, right here, is where we were discovered. 1973. We were just two kids with guitars and big dreams, playing for tips and hoping someone would notice us. And someone did." I felt the world tilt slightly. "You're Frank?" He nodded, tears still flowing freely. "Frank Castellano, though I suppose you might know me better as Franklin Castle." My jaw dropped. Franklin Castle was a legend in the music industry. He'd produced albums for some of the biggest names in country and folk music over the past 4 decades. He'd discovered and developed careers for dozens of artists, and his name was synonymous with authentic, heartfelt music. "You're Franklin Castle?" I said, stupidly. "The Franklin Castle." "I am. But before all that, I was just Frank. And Eric and I were going to be the next Simon and Garfunkel. We had it all planned out. We were going to write songs that mattered, make music that changed people's lives." "What happened?" Frank's expression darkened. "Life happened. I got offered a deal with a major label, and I took it. I left Eric behind. Told myself I'd bring him along later once I was established, but later never came. The solo career didn't work out, and by the time I realized what I'd lost, Eric had disappeared. I tried to find him for years, but he just vanished." He looked at the guitar in my hands with something approaching reverence. "That's his Martin, the one he bought with his first real paycheck from a gig. He used to say that guitar had magic in it, that it could make people feel things they didn't even know they were feeling." "He never told me about you," I said softly. "He never talked about his musical past at all." "I'm not surprised. I broke his heart when I left. Broke our partnership, our friendship, her dreams. It's the biggest regret of my life." Frank wiped his eyes and looked at me more closely. "You play like him. Not just the technique, but the soul. The way you make the guitar sing, that's Eric's gift. He taught me everything I know about music. And now you're here, on this corner, playing his guitar and his songs. That can't be a coincidence." I told him about Grandpa Eric's dying wish, about the strange request to play on this specific corner. Frank listened with growing amazement. "He sent you to me," Frank said finally. 50 years later, Eric found a way to bring us back together. Not for him, it's too late for that, but for you. I don't understand." Frank smiled through his tears. "Honey, I've been looking for an artist like you for 20 years. Someone with real talent, real authenticity, someone who understands that music is about more than just entertainment. I've been semi-retired because I couldn't find anyone worth working with." He gestured to the guitar case, which now had a small crowd gathered around it. "But here you are, playing music that makes people stop and listen, playing it the way your grandfather taught you. Eric always said that guitar had magic in it. Maybe he was right. Are you saying—" "I'm saying I want to produce your album. I want to help you make the music Eric would have been proud of. I want to give you the career he never got to have." I stared at him, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. "But you don't even know if I write my own songs. If I—" "Play me something original," Frank said. "Something you wrote." With shaking hands, I started playing a song I'd written about Grandpa Eric, about the lessons he'd taught me, about the way music could carry love across generations. It was raw, honest, probably too personal for a street corner performance, but it was mine. When I finished, Frank was crying again. "That's it," he said. "That's exactly what the world needs to hear. Music with heart, with story, with truth." He pulled out a business card and handed it to me. "Come to my studio tomorrow. Bring that guitar, bring your songs, and let's see what magic we can make together." I took the card with trembling fingers, staring at the elegant script, Franklin Castle Productions. This was it. This was the break I'd been dreaming of for 4 years. This was everything I'd ever wanted. But why did I feel like I was going to throw up? That night, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at Frank's business card and feeling the weight of possibility crushing down on me. I should have been ecstatic. I should have been calling everyone I knew, celebrating, planning my future. Instead, I was paralyzed by fear. What if I wasn't good enough? What if Frank heard my other songs and realized he'd made a mistake? What if I was just a novelty to him, a way to reconnect with my grandfather's memory rather than a real artist worth investing in? I picked up my phone and called my mom.
Jenny, how did it go? Did you do what your grandfather asked?
I did, I said, my voice shaky.
Mom, something incredible happened. I met someone, a music producer, a famous one. He wants to work with me. There was a long pause. That's wonderful, honey, isn't it? I don't know. I think so, but, Mom, what if I'm not ready? What if I fail? What if this is just some cosmic joke and I end up even more broke and disappointed than I am now?
Oh, sweetheart, Mom said, and I could hear the worry creeping into her voice. You've been through so much already. Maybe this is a sign that you should come home. You've honored your grandfather's wish. You've tried. No one could ask for more than that. Mrs. Wright called again today. The teaching position is still open. You could be home by Sunday. Start fresh on Monday. You could have a real life, Jenny. Stability. Security. A future you can count on. Her words echoed everything I'd been thinking, every fear that had been gnawing at me since Frank handed me his card. The safe choice. The practical choice. The choice that wouldn't leave me devastated if it didn't work out. Maybe you're right, I said quietly. Maybe I should come home. I think that would be wise, honey. You've chased this dream long enough. It's time to be realistic. After I hung up, I sat on my couch holding Grandpa Eric's guitar, running my fingers over the worn wood. I thought about the teaching job waiting for me in Ohio, about the steady paycheck and the health insurance and the retirement plan. I thought about my mom's relief, about finally being the responsible daughter she wanted me to be. I thought about giving up. By morning, I'd made my decision. I would go back to Ohio. I would take the teaching job. I would put Grandpa Eric's guitar in a closet and try to forget about the dreams that had brought me nothing but heartache. I was packing my few belongings when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Frank Castellano standing in my hallway, looking concerned and determined. You weren't going to show up today, were you? I stared at him, caught off guard. How did you find my address? I have my ways, and I have 50 years of experience reading people. Yesterday, when I gave you my card, you looked terrified. Today, you were supposed to be at my studio an hour ago, and you're nowhere to be found. So I'm guessing you're running. I stepped aside to let him in, embarrassed by my tiny apartment with its peeling paint and secondhand furniture. Frank looked around, taking in the packed boxes, the guitar case sitting by the door. Going somewhere? I'm going home, I said quietly. I'm going home. Why? The simple question broke something open in me. Because I'm scared, I said, the words tumbling out. Because what if you're wrong about me? What if I'm not as good as you think? What if I fail and end up even worse off than I am now? I can't keep doing this, Frank. I can't keep hoping and getting crushed. I'm 26 years old and I'm living like a teenager. My mom's right. It's time to be practical. Frank sat down on my couch, his expression thoughtful. Can I tell you a story, Jenny? I nodded, sinking into the chair across from him. 50 years ago, your grandfather and I were offered a choice. We could stay safe, keep playing small venues, make a modest living doing something we loved, or we could take a risk, sign with a label, try to make it big. The risk was that we might fail spectacularly, lose everything, end up worse off than when we started. What did you do?
We chose differently. I took the risk and left Eric behind. I was mad at him for not coming with me. We got into a fight. He chose safety and disappeared from my life. And you know what? We both regretted our choices for the rest of our lives. Frank leaned forward, his eyes intense. I regretted leaving him, abandoning our partnership for a solo career that never materialized. But Eric regretted not taking the risk. He regretted letting fear keep him from pursuing his dreams. He spent 50 years wondering what might have been. How do you know that? Because yesterday, when I saw you playing his guitar on that corner, I understood what he was doing. He wasn't just sending you to me for an audition. He was giving you the chance he never took. He was making sure you wouldn't spend your life wondering what if. Frank stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Nashville skyline. Your grandfather was talented, Jenny, really talented, but he let other people convince him to be practical, to choose security over dreams, and it ate at him for the rest of his life. But what if I fail? What if you succeed? Frank turned back to me. What if you're everything I think you are? What if your music touches people the way your grandfathers could have? What if you become the artist he always dreamed of being? And what if I don't? Then you'll have tried. You'll have given it everything you had, and you'll never have to wonder what might have been. Frank picked up the Grandpa Eric's guitar case and held it out to me. This guitar has been waiting 50 years to finish a conversation that got interrupted. Your grandfather sent you to me not just because he thought you were talented, but because he didn't want you to make the same mistake he did. I stared at the case, remembering Grandpa Eric's words. The world needs your songs, Jenny girl. Don't let them convince you otherwise. He knew, didn't he? He knew you'd be there. He knew you walked that route. I think Eric always knew more than he let on. I think he spent 50 years watching, waiting, planning, and when he realized his time was running out, he made sure his granddaughter would have the chance he never took. Frank set the guitar case down and pulled out his phone. I'm going to call my studio and tell them we're postponing our session. Not canceling, postponing. You need time to think, to decide what you really want. Frank. But Jenny, I want you to remember something. Fear is not a good reason to give up on your dreams. Practical concerns, financial worries, other people's expectations, none of that matters if you have something real to offer the world. And you do. I heard it yesterday in every note you played. He headed toward the door, then turned back. Your grandfather spent 50 years regretting the chance he didn't take. Don't spend the next 50 years regretting the chance you walked away from. After Frank left, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by packed boxes and the weight of an impossible decision. I picked up Grandpa Eric's guitar and played Wildwood Flower, the first song he'd ever taught me. As the familiar melody filled the small space, I could almost hear his voice. Music isn't just what we play, Jenny girl. It's how we love each other across time and space. I thought about the stories people had told at his funeral, about the lives he'd touched through music. I thought about the regret Frank had described, the weight of wondering what if for 50 years. I thought about the teaching job waiting for me in Ohio, safe and secure and soul-crushing. And I thought about my grandfather's dying wish, about the elaborate plan he'd orchestrated to give me the chance he'd never taken. I called my mom. Jenny, I thought you'd be on the road by now. Mom, I'm not coming home. There was a long silence. What do you mean? I mean, I'm staying. I'm taking the chance. I'm going to work with Frank and see what happens. Honey, we talked about this. You said you were ready to be practical. No, Mom, you said I should be practical. But Grandpa Eric spent his whole life being practical, and it was his biggest regret. I won't make the same mistake. Jenny, you're being foolish. This producer could be lying to you, taking advantage. He's not, Mom. And even if he is, even if this doesn't work out, at least I'll know I tried. At least I'll know I didn't give up on the thing I love most in the world because I was scared. My mother was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Your grandfather really said that? That not pursuing music was his biggest regret? Frank told me. They were partners, Mom. Grandpa Eric had a real chance at music career. And he chose safety instead. He chose what everyone expected him to choose, and he regretted it for 50 years. I just want you to be happy, Jenny. I want you to have a stable life. I know you do, but Mom, I can't be happy teaching music if I never tried to make music. I can't be stable if I'm always wondering what might have been. After I hung up, I called Frank. I was hoping you'd call, he said. I want to try, I said. I want to take the chance, but Frank, I need you to promise me something. What's that? Promise me you'll be honest. If I'm not good enough, if my songs aren't what you thought they were, promise me you'll tell me. I don't want to waste your time or mine chasing something that isn't real. I promise, Frank said. But Jenny, I also need you to promise me something. What? Promise me you'll give this everything you have. Promise me you won't hold back because you're scared. Your grandfather held back and it cost him his dreams. Don't make the same mistake. The next morning, I walked into Franklin Castle Productions carrying Grandpa Eric's guitar and a folder full of songs I'd written over the past 4 years. The studio was everything I'd imagined. State-of-the-art equipment, gold records on the walls, the kind of place where musical magic happened. Frank introduced me to his team. Engineers, session musicians, songwriters who'd worked with some of the biggest names in the industry. I felt completely out of my league, but Frank's confidence in me was unwavering. Let's start with the song you played yesterday, the one about Eric. I played Grandfather's Guitar, the song I'd written about the lessons Grandpa Eric had taught me, about the way music could carry love across generations. When I finished, the room was silent. That's a hit, said Marcus, Frank's lead engineer. That's a song that's going to make people cry in their cars. We spent the next 6 hours going through my catalog, arranging songs, talking about themes and sounds, and the story we wanted to tell. Frank was a master at his craft, able to hear possibilities in my rough demos that I'd never imagined. You have something special, Jenny. You have what Grandpa Eric had, the ability to make people feel something real. That's rarer than you know. Over the next 3 months, we worked together to create my debut album. Frank brought in the best musicians in Nashville, but he insisted that every song feature Grandpa Eric's Martin guitar. That guitar is part of the story, he said. It's the thread that connects everything. The album, which we titled Corner of Dreams, was a love letter to my grandfather and to everyone who'd ever been told to give up on their dreams. The title track was about that afternoon on 6th and Main, about divine appointments disguised as dying wishes. But the most important song on the album was one Frank and I wrote together, called 50 Years Too Late. It was about friendship, forgiveness, and second chances. It was about 2 young men who'd lost each other and found their way back through the music of a granddaughter who carried both their dreams. When the album was finished, Frank played it for me in its entirety. As the last notes of Grandfather's Guitar faded away, I realized I was crying. He would have been so proud, I whispered. He is proud, Frank said. Wherever he is, Eric is proud. You did it, Jenny. You took the chance he never could. The album was released 7 months after that afternoon on the street corner, and it exceeded everyone's expectations. Corner of Dreams debuted at number 3 on the country charts and crossed over to the pop charts as well. The title track became a radio hit, and Grandfather's Guitar became an anthem for anyone who'd ever lost someone they loved. But more than the commercial success, I was overwhelmed by the response from listeners. People wrote to tell me how the album had helped them through difficult times, how it had inspired them to pursue their own dreams, how it had reminded them of their own grandparents and the wisdom they'd shared. A year later, I was standing on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry, holding Grandpa Eric's Martin guitar and looking out at a sea of faces. Franklin Castle was standing in the wings, beaming with pride, and I could almost see my grandfather there beside him. "This first song," I told the crowd, "is for my grandfather, Eric Martinez, who taught me that music isn't just what we play, it's how we love each other across time and space." I started playing Wildwood Flower, the same song I'd played on that corner a year ago, and as the familiar melody filled the historic venue, I felt Grandpa Eric's presence as clearly as if he were standing beside me. After the show, Frank and I sat in my dressing room looking at the photograph from Grandpa Eric's guitar case. Frank had brought his own copy of the same picture, kept in his wallet for 50 years. "You know what I think?" Frank said, studying the image of two young dreamers on a street corner. "I think Eric planned this whole thing, not just sending you to that corner, but everything. The timing, the songs, even the fact that I happened to be walking down 6th Avenue that day." "You think he knew you'd be there?" "I think Eric always knew things the rest of us didn't. He had a way of seeing connections, possibilities, futures that others missed. He probably knew I walked that route every afternoon. It's been my routine for years, visiting the old neighborhood, remembering what we used to dream about." Frank smiled, a peaceful expression settling over his weathered features. He gave us both what we needed. You got your break, your chance to share your music with the world, and I got my redemption, my chance to honor the partnership I'd thrown away. And Grandpa Eric? Eric got his legacy. Every time you play that guitar, every time you sing one of those songs he taught you, every time someone hears your music and feels something real, that's Eric living on. That's his gift to the world, passed through you.
2 years later, I was back on the corner of 6th and Main, but this time it wasn't for an audition. Frank and I created a charity event, Eric Martinez Day. The show would be open to all audiences, but donations would be sent to a social project that buys instruments and gives free lessons to children, teenagers, people of all ages who want to learn a musical instrument and can't afford it. The event had grown beyond anything we'd imagined. What started as a small tribute had become a Nashville institution, drawing thousands of people and raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for music education. Local news stations covered it, music industry executives attended to scout new talent, and established artists volunteered their time to perform. As I tuned Grandpa Eric's guitar before taking the stage, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. 3 years ago, I had been ready to give up on music entirely, convinced that I wasn't good enough, that my dreams were foolish and impractical. Now I was headlining my own concert with a platinum album, a Grammy nomination, and a tour that had sold out venues across the country. But more than the success, more than the recognition, I was grateful for the understanding. I finally knew who my grandfather really was, not just the gentle man who taught me to play guitar, but a dreamer who'd never stopped believing in the power of music to change lives, even when he'd been too afraid to pursue his own dreams. The crowd that had gathered was diverse. Families with young children, elderly couples who remembered the music of the 1970s, teenagers with guitars slung over their shoulders, and tourists who'd stumbled upon something magical. In the front row, I spotted a young girl, maybe 8 years old, clutching a small acoustic guitar and watching me with the same wide-eyed wonder I'd felt when Grandpa Eric first put an instrument in my hands. "This first song," I told the crowd, my voice carrying over the sound system we'd set up for the event, "is for my grandfather, Eric Martinez, who taught me that the most magical moments happen when you give yourself to doing what you love and aren't trying to prove something to someone." I started playing Wildwood Flower, and as the familiar melody filled the air, I saw Frank standing at the side of the stage, his own guitar in hand.
Without a word, he walked out and joined me, adding the harmony parts he and Grandpa Eric had perfected 50 years ago on this very corner. The crowd was mesmerized. Here was Franklin Castle, the legendary producer, playing publicly for the first time in decades, honoring a partnership that had been broken by time and pride, but healed by music and forgiveness. When we finished the song, Frank stepped up to the microphone. 50 years ago, he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades, my best friend and I stood on this corner, with nothing but our guitars and our dreams. We thought we were just busking for tips. We had no idea we were auditioning for the rest of our lives. He gestured to me, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Eric Martinez never got the career he deserved, but his legacy lives on in his granddaughter. And today, we're here to make sure that other young dreamers get the chances we didn't know we were taking. The concert continued for 3 hours, featuring artists Frank and I had discovered and nurtured through our foundation. Each performer had their own story. A teenager from a broken home who'd found hope in songwriting, a single mother who'd returned to music after years of putting her dreams on hold, an elderly man who'd never had the courage to share his songs until he was 75 years old. As the sun began to set over downtown Nashville, I took the stage for my final song of the evening. I'd written it specifically for this event, and I'd never performed it publicly before. This song is called "The Corner Where Dreams Begin," I said. It's about the places where our lives change, often without us even knowing it. It's about the people who believe in us when we can't believe in ourselves. And it's about the courage to take chances, even when we're terrified of failing. The song was a culmination of everything I'd learned over the past 3 years. About music, about family, about the way love can transcend time and space to guide us toward our destinies. As I sang the final chorus, I looked out at the crowd and saw faces lit up with hope, with possibility, with the same dreams that had brought my grandfather and Frank to this corner 50 years ago. When the concert ended and the crowd began to disperse, the little girl with the guitar approached the stage. Her mother was with her, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry to bother you, but my daughter has been learning guitar, and she wanted to ask you something." I knelt down to the girl's level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Eva," she said shyly. "I've been practicing the song you played first, Wildwood Flower. My grandpa taught it to me before he died." My heart clenched. "That's a beautiful song. Your grandpa had good taste. Could you show me how to play it the way you do, the way that makes people cry?" I looked up at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Of course," I said. "But first, let me tell you something my grandfather told me. Music isn't just about playing the right notes. It's about playing with your heart, about sharing your feelings with other people through the guitar." I spent the next 20 minutes sitting on the edge of the stage with Eva, showing her finger-picking techniques and talking about the emotion behind the music. As we played together, I saw Frank watching from the wings, a knowing smile on his face. "You know what I think?" he said later as we packed up the equipment. "I think Eric's still orchestrating things. That little girl, the way she approached you, the song she wanted to learn, that wasn't coincidence. You think he's still pulling strings from beyond? I think love like that doesn't just disappear when someone dies. I think it finds ways to keep working, keep connecting people, keep making magic happen." As we loaded the last of the equipment into the truck, I took one final look at the corner of 6th and Main. In the gathering darkness, it looked like any other street corner in downtown Nashville. But I knew better. I knew it was a place where dreams began, where impossible things became possible, where a grandfather's love could reach across death to give his granddaughter the chance he'd never taken. 3 years ago, I'd stood on this corner thinking I was fulfilling a dying man's sentimental wish. I'd had no idea I was walking into the most important audition of my life, orchestrated by a man who'd spent 50 years planning the perfect moment for his granddaughter to meet her destiny. The world needs your songs, Jenny girl. Don't let them convince you otherwise.
He'd been right, as always. The world had needed my songs. It had just taken a dying wish, a street corner, and 50 years of patient planning to bring them to the right ears. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in mystery, and sometimes the most important auditions happen when we think we're just honoring the memory of someone we love. But most importantly, sometimes the people who believe in us most are the ones who find ways to keep believing even after they're gone. An absolutely beautiful story about family legacy, the power of music, and how love finds a way to create miracles even after we're gone. What's a dying wish or piece of advice from a loved one that changed your life? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story of music, family, and dreams that refuse to die touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories about the connections that shape our lives. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.